What yet? It's Paul from Wicked Acorn. I'm scrambling today to get ready for you. It's always a scramble to meet a deadline, but we kind of met it. Uh, Today in history, we're going to talk about our photo that we left you with last time. And buenas noches, bonjour, what yet? Today in history, our photo from our last live stream. We're going to get to that real quick, but we're first going to look at our photo for the next live stream. Can you tell me where this is? And this is the same place. So it's a Greater Manchester photo, and I just included the second one. The first one is 1911, and the second one is 1974, in more or less the same place in Greater Manchester. And I included the second one. I didn't want to make it too easy this time. The second one I only included because I remember that inflatable bunny rabbit. My sister and I both got one of those. She got a pink one and I got a blue one for Easter one year when we were little kids. Before 1974, I think. But as soon as I saw that, I went, "Oh, I remember that." So that's just a little thing for me. So today in history, we can't waste any time. Our photo last time was this place, and nobody guessed it, but maybe from the title, somebody guessed Canada, and it is Canada, and it is Quebec City, in Quebec, of course. And the thing we're going to talk about today is the Battle of Quebec, and I really risk losing everybody today because I was watching Stephen Fry, and he did a tour of the United States. Yes, it's Quebec City. Um, he did a program where he went to all 50 states or something, and it's a great program. Good evening, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's a great program he did, and he was asked to do. He said, "Can we do one about Canada? I'd love to do one about Canada." And they said the thing about Canadian history and Canadian things is not even Canadians will watch it. So hopefully I don't lose everybody here with a bit of Canadian history today, because as I keep telling you, when I'm talking about your history, well, your history is my history. And in this case, my history is your history. So this is, we're talking about the Battle of Quebec because on this day in history, 1759, the Battle of Quebec ends and the French surrender to the British, who capture Quebec City. And this guy here was the commander of the British forces. His name was James Wolfe. And that statue you see, and the inscription of the statue, is the first thing you see when you go up to the Greenwich Observatory. It's the first thing you see is that statue. And Wolfe, James Wolfe, was the commander of the British forces at the Battle of Quebec. And he was, in his time, the Nelson of Britain. He was the hero of Britain in his day. So he's completely forgotten. The Battle of Quebec is the beginning of the end of the 7 Years' War. And the 7 Years' War is a forgotten war, although it was World War Zero. It was the first World War, really. And we're going to get into that. We got a bunch of videos to watch. So I will show you our photo one more time. And It's a Greater Manchester photo, so you can come back and have a look at that. And we are going to roll the clip. Let's see, I need to mute that for a moment. And I need to switch over here to this one, and then switch this one. As I get used to this, I won't have to talk through it as I do it. So we're going to have a look at the real First World War, the 7 Years' War. So here's a little introduction to the 7 Years' War. Now that is muted. I don't know why it's doing that. So hopefully there won't be any ads in this one to worry about.
World War I is often called the First World War. But what if it wasn't? More than 150 years earlier, a war erupted that spanned 5 continents and reshaped the world. This is the story of the 7 Years' War, the real First World War. The war started over territory disputes between Britain and France in North America. Both empires wanted control over trade and land, leading to global conflict. What began as a colonial struggle exploded into a European war. Prussia, led by Frederick the Great, fought against Austria, Russia, and France, while Britain backed Prussia. A young George Washington fought for Britain in the French and Indian War, the North American theater of the 7 Years' War. His early battles set the stage for his later role in the American Revolution. The Battle of the Plains of Abraham was a turning point. Britain captured Quebec, securing Canada and ending French control in North America. The war wasn't just in Europe. Britain and France fought in India, the Caribbean, and Africa. Britain's victories in India laid the foundation for its future empire. At Plassey, British commander Robert Clive defeated the French-backed Bengal ruler, securing India as a British colony. After 7 brutal years, Britain won, but at a cost. The Treaty of Paris redrew the world map. France lost Canada, India, and Caribbean islands. The war left Britain in massive debt, leading to taxing the American colonies, which helped spark the American Revolution. It also set the stage for Napoleon's rise in France. The 7 Years' War changed the world. Should it be considered the real First World War? Let me know in the comments.
So yeah, the 7 Years' War. Oh, that is annoying. It is kind of a forgotten war. It's not talked about much. And it started, the 7 Years' War, and we've talked about this before, wars and events in history have different names in different places. So in America, they don't call it the 7 Years' War. In America, it's called the French-Indian War. And it was started by George Washington. George Washington essentially started the 7 Years' War. And we forget that Washington and the American founding fathers were loyal British subjects. They really were. They were loyal British subjects, and they didn't want to leave Britain. But after the 7 Years' War, Britain was bankrupt, and to pay off their debts, they taxed the American colonies. And there's an interesting little Newfoundland story about that. So the Stamp Act, I believe it was called, the taxation without representation that led to the American Revolution. So everybody knew it was coming. This tax, the Stamp Act, was coming, and it led to the American Revolution. But of course, Newfoundland had the Stamp Act imposed on it as well. But we did something different. We didn't go to war. Um, we would not allow the ship to dock. So until the act was read on our soil, it didn't take effect. We wouldn't let them land on our shores. We wouldn't let the British ship carrying the Stamp Act to land. So eventually the Act was made away with. But that's a little interesting tidbit of that, how we dealt with it. But let's get a little background on the 7 Years' War. This is uh, this is an actor playing Washington, and he's going to tell us a little bit about how the 7 Years' War got started, how he started it.
To again look for a way to increase my prospects, and I once again locked my sights towards military service. At the time, the defense of Virginia fell to the militia, and the colony was divided into military districts. Each district was headed by an adjutant general. I pursued such posting, and with the goodwill of Colonel Fairfax and the new Lieutenant Governor, Robert Dinwiddie, I secured the post. Thus it was that just before my 21st birthday, I took the oath and became Major George Washington. The reason the colony of Virginia had established a militia was, of course, for defense against hostile Indian tribes and that ancient enemy of Great Britain, France. You see, as British colonists in Virginia, Maryland, and Pennsylvania were expanding into this territory on the west side of the mountains, so too the French had extended their influence into this virgin territory, coming down from Canada in the north. In order to protect the British claim to this lush new land, it was advocated that a fort be established at the forks of the Ohio River. Meanwhile, the French were already building forts to protect their interest in this new land. In August of 1753, Governor Dinwiddie got permission from London to build forts in Ohio. He also received orders to deliver an ultimatum to the French: leave this place or risk military confrontation. Naturally, as soon as I heard of the mission, I rode straight to Williamsburg and volunteered. The governor chose me for the task, and I set off on the same day. In addition to delivering the ultimatum and bringing back intelligence on the French presence in the Ohio Territory, I was to evaluate a place for the fort where the Allegheny, Monongahela, and Ohio rivers met, and make contact with local Indian tribes. I traveled with only a translator and a guide, the better part of 250 miles, to discover the French commander at Fort Le Boeuf, about 15 miles from Lake Erie. The French commander received us with polite indifference, and after reviewing the governor's letter, he said he felt no need to obey the edict and reserved the right to arrest British trappers. On December the 14th, he gave me a sealed letter for Governor Dinwiddie, and I departed. I will not at this time regale you with the story of the perilous trek I made across the mountains in the dead of winter, but 1 month later I delivered the French commander's reply to the governor in Williamsburg. Once it became clear that the French would not be removed except through force of arms, I was promoted to the rank of lieutenant colonel and authorized to raise a regiment of 100 men, which was eventually increased to 160. My orders were to maintain a defensive posture, but I might incite hostilities if the French were to meddle with military works or settlements. This would include the use of deadly force in order to restrain, make prisoner, or destroy any foe. I set out with my men in early April. About 3 weeks into our trek, we received word that the French had sent down a large contingent of men from Lake Erie and had captured the men that the governor had sent to build a fort at the headwaters of the Ohio. I wrote the governors of Virginia and Maryland to ask them for more men. On May the 24th, we received news from an Indian trader at a nearby settlement that a French detachment had been seen a mere 18 miles away from our position. We were in an area called Great Meadows, and after quickly surveilling the area, I saw 2 natural gullies within a few yards of each other that could act as natural trenches, and so I ordered the men to begin clearing brush and trees to create a defensible position with a field of fire. A few nights later, our sentries heard movement just outside the camp and fired upon it, to no avail. In the morning, a local trapper of my acquaintance rode into camp to tell us that the previous noon a contingent of 50 French soldiers had come to his nearby settlement and made ready to kill his milk cow and break up his belongings. On his way to warn us, he had seen tracks of numerous white men, which he took to be of the same party. Scouts were sent out, and I formed a hunting party of 40 men and 10 of our Seneca Indian allies. We marched through the pitch-black night and the pouring rain, and as day dawned and the sun came out, we discovered them, camped in a little hollow only 7 miles from our position at Great Meadows. We approached them in near silence until we had them completely surrounded. I stepped forward on the right flank to call for their surrender, and they immediately flew to arms. Afterwards, no one could say who had fired the first shot, but we fired 2 volleys into them, and then our Indian allies swooped in, and the Frenchmen who were...
So, of course, that is his account. The French have a different account, of course. No one could say he's being a little honest there, the actor, because Washington declared that the French fired the first shot, and of course the French declared that Washington fired the first shot. So there's always at least 2 versions of the story, isn't there?
Threw down their weapons. The whole affair lasted perhaps 15 minutes. It was not until we were marching the prisoners back to our camp that they protested that they had been sent as emissaries with an ultimatum from the French commander that we vacate land owned by their king. They insisted that they should be treated as attendants of an ambassador and not prisoners of war. They said that they should be treated the way that I was treated by the French when I had delivered the British ultimatum almost 6 months before. When I had set out to meet the French the year before to deliver the governor's message, I had journeyed not with a large contingent of soldiers, but with an interpreter and a local trapper and a few Indian guides. I had come openly, and I had presented myself to the first French officer that I met. Conversely, they had brought a large party of soldiers within a few miles of our camp. There was evidence that they had actually come much closer, and rather than boldly declare their presence, they had retreated in an attempt to leave us unaware of them. In all likelihood, they had already sent a runner back to the French position at Fort Duquesne. Unfortunately, their commander, Ensign Jumonville, had been killed in the initial volley. Although in his personal papers, we did find that there was a letter addressed to the commandant of English troops on the lands of the French king. However, it is my belief that this was a ruse, and that they were there to spy out our position and then send for reinforcements so that they could destroy us. After all, the month before, the French had already attacked the British position at the 3 Rivers, and they were already our enemy. The capture of the French party had been almost perfect, with only 1 man killed on our side. However, we had been unable to completely encompass the camp before the firing began, and at least 1 Frenchman managed to slip through our encirclement and carry away word of the battle. So we returned to our encampment at Great Meadow, and the following day I wrote the governor to tell him of our encounter and once again to ask for reinforcements. I also had the man begin to build a crude palisade, which I called Fort Necessity. The French attacked us 5 weeks later. In the meantime, I had finally received the reinforcements for which I'd been begging. 200 more Virginians helped to bolster my command, which had been dwindling due to desertions and disease. Also joining us was an independent command of 100 men from South Carolina. Meanwhile, however, our Indian allies had become more and more apprehensive at the thought of a concentrated French attack. In the weeks of June, the 3rd week, we held a conference with the Seneca chief, and he dissolved the alliance between our peoples. The French attacked on July 3rd, 1754. Though we drove off their initial assault, the French realized that they could just retreat to the cover of the trees and keep up a hot fire on us from an elevated position. In the late afternoon, rain began to fall, and it turned our little fort into a bowl of mud and made our weapons useless. When it was nearly nightfall, the French commander signaled that he would parley. I sent my interpreter over to discover the terms of the surrender, and he brought back a document. Of course, it was written in French, so by guttering candle in the rain, I had him translate the document to myself and Captain Mackay, and we signed it. One of the stipulations of the surrender was that we admit to causing the death of Jumonville, the French emissary. At least that is how our interpreter translated it to us that night in the mud and rain. I later found out that a more precise translation, rather than cause the death of, would have been assassinated. So by signing this document, I unknowingly admitted to assassinating a French diplomat. When word of the...
So that is the event that kicked off the 7 Years' War. It was, ironically, on July 4th in, what year was that? 1750 something. And that was what kicked off the 7 Years' War, which, of course, the Americans call the French-Indian War. And it is ironic that that is what led to the 7 Years' War, is what caused the American Revolution. And the 7 Years' War was caused by George Washington. So that's a little ironic, isn't it? So we got another one here. Now we're going to get into the actual Battle of Quebec. And let's see here. Okay, I hope this is not too long for you. But as I said, this is my history is your history, and your history is my history. And let's see if I can tie this back to Wicked Acorn in Greater Manchester, here in Sale in Cheshire. Let's see what kind of connection we can make.
Canada has been rooted here for 150 years. Many families are into their 5th generation. For them, France is a dim memory in stories told by grandfathers. But all of this would change by June of 1756. Europe erupts into war. France and Britain will fight for world dominance in the farthest reaches of their empires. Quebec is now a wartime city. Its streets overflow with French soldiers, Acadian refugees, and native warriors. The Marquis de Vaudreuil is the first Canadian-born governor of the colony. He believes a Canadian should command the French forces here.
War in this country is very different from the wars in Europe. The Canadians and Indians would not march with the same confidence under the order of a commander of the troops from France as they would under the officers of this colony.
But France is not listening. Paris sends the Marquis de Montcalm to command in the North American War. He has a good military record, but little money.
I believed I must accept an honorable commission, but it would also be a sensitive one, which secures my son's fortune. An important goal for a father, but it was a commission I never asked for, nor desired.
The governor and the general quickly come to detest each other. Montcalm loses no time in showing his opinion of most Canadian officers.
Langy, excellent. Marin, brave, but stupid. The rest are not worth mentioning.
Monsieur de Montcalm is so quick-tempered that he goes to the length of striking the Canadians. How can he restrain his officers when he cannot restrain himself?
Vaudreuil and Montcalm will never agree on how to conduct the war. The Canadians fight Indian style, moving in quick, aggressive raids. In one attack, Vaudreuil sends 300 raiders against the community of German flats in the Mohawk Valley. They kill 50 settlers, take 32 scalps, and 150 women and children as prisoners.
So that's an interesting point there about the French under the Canadian governor were fighting Indian style. And it's an interesting thing. And Montcalm comes in, and of course he fights in the normal European way. But it's an interesting thing to think about, because that's basically why, among other things, the reason the British lost the American Revolution was because the Americans didn't fight the European way. It was, more guerrilla warfare. And that, among many other things, like the French joining in against them, is the reason that the American colonies were lost. So it would have been interesting if this guy had kept control of the forces and was fighting the British in the native guerrilla style. It would have been interesting to see what history would have turned out to be.
Vaudreuil's war is a war of attrition.
It is no longer the time when a few scalps or the burning of a few houses is any advantage or even an object. Petty means, petty ideas, petty counsels about details are now dangerous, and waste of material and time.
Instead, Montcalm brings European tactics into the wilderness, moving massive siege guns to attack the enemy's strongholds head-on. In 1 year, he has 2 stunning victories. He devastates the British at Fort Oswego. Then he moves south and captures Fort William Henry. In North America, the British are losing forts. But in Europe, the British are losing entire armies. France is winning the war. A powerful minister, William Pitt, advances a new idea. If Britain can't defeat the French in Europe, then beat them in their colonies. A daring twofold plan is conceived. Invade Canada by land from the American colonies. And by sea, send a massive armada against the fortress of Louisbourg. It will be the greatest naval invasion in North American history. On the remote Atlantic coast, the fortress of Louisbourg guards the gateway to Canada. To get to Quebec, it must be destroyed. The invasion of Canada begins here at Louisbourg. The British fleet arrives on June 1st, 1758. 14,000 men strong. One of them, a 31-year-old brigadier obsessed with glory. Days before the war was declared, he wrote to his mother.
So I just want to keep going here a little bit because I watched this last night, and I'm not going to play the whole thing, just a few more minutes of this, because when I watched this last night, I don't know when this is from. It's probably from the 1980s, sometime when this documentary was made. A friend of mine, an acquaintance, colleague, is in this film, Bob Joy, and he plays James Wolfe, General Wolfe, in this documentary. And I've worked with Bob Joy on several TV shows and films, and he's like the first Newfoundland actor that no, not the first, but the first of like my generation that made it in America. He's in everything. Everything you see on television, he's in it. Every American TV show you watch, he's in it. I think he lives in New York now, and yeah, he's in everything. He's in a show called The Institute now, Stephen King story on Netflix, and he's in everything. Law and Order. He is in everything. He did a documentary called That Guy Who Was in That Thing, about himself. That guy who was in that thing. So it was funny to see him. Like I said, he doesn't look like this anymore. Well, he does look like this, but he looks older, of course, as do we all.
All notions of peace are now at an end. We must, however, hope that fortune will favor us, since we do our best to deserve her smiles. Your obedient and affectionate son, James Wolfe.
The British fleet begins to bombard the town. Louisbourg's governor is Augustin de Drucourt. He knows the situation is hopeless, but if he can hold out through the summer, it will be too late for the British to move on to Quebec this year. It is a costly strategy.
It seems that their intention is not only to seriously breach the walls, but above all to kill the residents and to burn the town.
Out of the devastation, a heroine emerges to sustain the garrison's morale. Every morning, Marianne de Drucourt, the governor's wife, climbs to the ramparts.
This lady has performed such exploits during the siege as must entitle her to rank among the most illustrious of her sex, for she fired 3 cannon every day in order to animate the gunners.
Marianne de Drucourt even acquires a nom de guerre. She is called La Bombardière. The British will have their own hero. James Wolfe leads a reckless assault to get the first British troops ashore. Wolfe establishes a reputation for boldness and daring, but not for mercy. Governor Drucourt asks for help for Louisbourg's wounded.
When the French are in a scrape, they are ready to cry out on behalf of the human species. When fortune favors them, none more bloody, more inhuman. Montcalm has changed the very nature of war and has forced us, in some measure, to a deterring and dreadful vengeance.
After 2 months of bombardment, Drucourt surrenders. He has delayed the British assault on Quebec for now.
So that's how the Battle of Quebec begins. one more. We'll get to the end of the war, which happened today in history. And we'll see if we can get this back to Wicked Acorn.
Thursday, September the 13th, 1759. A steep rock face rises 200 feet above the river. The only access to the top, a narrow goat path. James Wolfe has ordered all the landing craft to drift down the river, and the troops to scale this forbidding face to a field he has never walked. All night, the British Army climbs. In the morning, on the plains of Abraham, James Wolfe and his commanders survey the field. He has only seen the plains through a telescope 3 days ago. An abandoned farmer's field, uneven, filled with scrub. Wolfe has placed himself between two armies. On one side, Montcalm's main force is at Beauport, an hour's march away. But behind Wolfe, there is another French army, 2,000 men scattered along the St. Lawrence under Bougainville, who can mobilize within a few hours. Wolfe is gambling. Montcalm will take the bait. If Wolfe can't tempt Montcalm into a quick battle here this morning, his position is militarily desperate. Montcalm quickly mobilizes, but he's uncertain about the British invasion plan. He sends 5,000 men towards the plains of Abraham and leaves the rest of his force to guard the Beauport trenches.
So it's interesting how Wolfe is not remembered. He was a hero in his own time. Well, after his own time, as you will see in a moment.
It is the morning of September the 13th, 1759. James Wolfe is desperate. He's placed his army in a precarious position, hoping the French will attack him. The Marquis de Montcalm is shaken and uncertain. Is this the real British invasion or a diversion? The battle for North America will unfold here, on an abandoned farmer's field, a mile from Quebec. It is 9:30. The real battle has not yet begun. For 30 minutes, the British artillery pummels the French line to create disorder while the army is still forming on the hill. Montcalm decides he will not wait for Bougainville's reinforcements. He will strike at the British this morning. He rides to his artillery commander, Montbéliard.
I spoke for a moment with Monsieur le Marquis de Montcalm, who told me we will not be able to avoid the battle. If we give them enough time to establish themselves, we will never be able to attack with the kind of army we have.
Montcalm orders a general advance. At approximately 10 o'clock, the Battle of the Plains of Abraham begins. It is a textbook maneuver. Montcalm's army will advance in a massive column. It will sweep down the hill and smash the thin red line. But the French line that started down the hill is uncoordinated, and after a short distance, the first mistake. Someone gives the order to halt the advance and fire. The ragged volley is pointless. The British are far out of range. The French resume the advance, their lines more confused and disordered with every step. Wolfe's soldiers wait. When the French are within 40 yards of the British, they form for their second volley. This time they can see the faces of the men in the British line. French reload, the British take position to fire. Finally, in the smoke and confusion, James Wolfe issues the most important military command of his life. The British volley is devastating. A mile-wide burst of concentrated fire. The French line is dazed, but stands its ground. Then the Highlanders unleash an advance with broadswords that can slice a man in half. Joseph Trahan of the Acadian militia is right in front of them.
I can remember the Scotch Highlanders flying wildly after us, with streaming plaids, bonnets, and large swords, like so many infuriated demons.
British bayonets draws closer. Confusion finally crumbles the French line. Plains of Abraham has lasted barely 15 minutes. Sometime just after the British volley, James Wolfe is struck by a fatal shot in the chest. At the crest of the hill, Montcalm is engulfed in a stream of retreating men. Sometime in the next few moments, he is struck by a musket ball below his ribs. Most of the French flee up the hill towards the walls of Quebec. With them, Joseph Trahan.
I was amongst the fugitives and received in the calf of the leg a spent bullet, which stretched me on the ground. I thought it was all over for me, but presently I rose up and continued to run.
The British are within reach of the gates of Quebec, with the Highlanders leading the charge. Until they are stunned by a barrage of fire from the surrounding woods and fields. Hundreds of Canadian militia and Indians cover the retreating French army. The first wounded are brought to the General Hospital and to Marie de la Visitation.
We were in the midst of the dead, the dying, which were brought to us by hundreds. Many of them are friends, are relations. It was necessary to smother our grief and extend ourselves to relieve them.
Even though the French vastly outnumber the British, Vaudreuil has decided they will not fight again the next day. He orders the soldiers to abandon Quebec and Beauport. Some of the citizens stone them and shout, "Cowards!" The battlefield is left now to the dead and the dying. Colonel Etienne Guillaume de Saint-Nazaire, mortally wounded, will die the next day. François Clément Boucher de la Perrière, who fought today with his eyes failing him, will die by evening. James Wolfe lived only a few minutes, long enough to hear that he had defeated the French. His body will be sent back to England, where he will be the Empire's newest hero. He was 32 years old. Louis-Joseph, the Marquis de Montcalm, will survive for one more day. His body is put in a makeshift box because there are no coffins left, and buried in a hole made by a British cannonball. He was 47 years old. "1,300 men were killed or wounded on the Plains of Abraham. The Canadians from the parishes and cities of New France, the youths of the English Midlands, the dispossessed of the Scottish Highlands, the unemployed from Normandy and Provence. All will be buried, French and English together, in large common pits on the plains. The location of their graves will never be marked. "10 days after the battle, the French artillery commander Montbéliard makes an entry in his journal.
20 times I have picked up my pen, and 20 times sorrow has made it fall from my hands. How can I bring to mind such overwhelming events? We were saved, and now we are lost.
So it's really interesting. I hope I didn't bore you too much with Canadian history there, but like I said, my history is your history. And it's really interesting that General Wolfe, is kind of forgotten in history. He was the Admiral Nelson of his day. After the Battle of Quebec, he was celebrated just like Nelson in his day, but I guess all the events that happened afterwards, the Napoleonic Wars came right on his heels, and the Battle of Quebec and the French losing North America is the end of the 7 Years' War. Not long after the 7 Years' War ended, and Wolfe was the hero of the 7 Years' War, and the 7 Years' War is kind of forgotten, and because everything came in quick succession afterwards, the American Revolution and all that stuff happened. But in the aftermath of it's a little known part of history, but in its time, you can imagine how important it was. It was the First World War. It was the first time the entire world was at war, a global conflict. And Wolfe is just forgotten. But if you're ever in Greenwich, he's buried in Greenwich. His body was brought back in a cask of rum, and he's buried in Greenwich, and there's a statue to him. First thing you see when you go to the observatory in Greenwich. It's the implication of it in the American Revolution is so ironic that George Washington kicked off this whole thing, and it's the reason why the American Revolution happened, because of the 7 Years' War. Britain was bankrupt and started taxing the colonies to pay for the war. Incredible how it all ties together. But it's really interesting because, as you can see, Canada has all the British reenactors, and every year the reenactors go and reenact battles like the American Revolution battles, and we send our reenactors down to reenact those battles down in the States. And so that's kind of interesting. We replay it, and the War of 1812 and many other battles, but it's pretty interesting. This is stuff I was taught in school. The Battle of Quebec was the history we learned. That was the only history we learned in, I think it was like grade 6 or something. That was the history we did that year. The book was the Battle of Quebec. So it's our Battle of Hastings. It's when one country became the ruler of North America, of Canada. And like I said, it's our Battle of Hastings, because North America went back and forth from the French to the English to the Spanish. So it was changing hands all the time. Newfoundland especially went back and forth between the French and the English and the Portuguese, and everybody was fighting over North America. So it was kind of our Battle of Hastings, the Battle of Quebec. And the implications of that are interesting too, because it's like, it's only a couple, 300 years ago, right? So there's still, it's still an open wound in a way, because in Quebec is mainly French, and it's still a sore spot. And in the 70s, in the late 1970s, Quebec had a referendum to leave Canada. So it's still an open wound. And when I was thinking about that today, it's our Battle of Hastings, 1066. So a couple 300 years later, in the 1300s, I wonder how much anti Norman sentiment there was in the country, and like the Scottish, talking about the Jacobites and the Highlanders that fought in this battle, and that's only a couple of hundred years ago, right? A couple 300 years ago. So there's still resentment there. Scotland wants to have a referendum and leave the country, leave the kingdom, United Kingdom. So it takes a long time for these wounds to heal. Here we are, a few hundred years later, and the wounds are still not fully healed. So it's interesting. I think it's our Battle of Hastings, and it's really interesting that it was started by George Washington. So let's see if I can bring it back to Cheshire and the Greater Manchester and this part of the world, our part of the world. So I had a look, and at General Hugh Warburton, 1695 to 1771, born in Withington Hall, Cheshire. So he was a Cheshire native, Withington Hall. It's around Northwich, I think. He served in the British Army during the 7 Years' War, including the campaigns in North America, the siege of Louisbourg in Quebec, and he was primarily with the 27th Regiment of Foot. So that's the closest individual I can find to us here in Sale. However, the Cheshire Regiment was very influential in the Battle of Quebec and the French Indian War and the American Revolution. We have Lieutenant Colonel James Abercrombie. He was the commanding officer of the 22nd Cheshire Regiment of Foot during the early stages of the American Revolutionary War. Embarked in advance of the regiment at the request of General Thomas Gage, and arrived at Boston just before the Battle of Bunker Hill, where he was killed in action. His death marked a significant loss for the British forces early in the conflict. Major General William Crosby, commanding officer of the 22nd Cheshire Regiment of Foot during the American Revolutionary War. He led the regiment during the Battle of Bunker Hill, subsequent campaigns in New York and New Jersey, promoted to Major General in 1794. Later served as Lieutenant Governor of Portsmouth, American Revolutionary War. Cheshire Military Legacy. It was renamed the 22nd Cheshire Regiment of Foot in 1782. It continued to serve in various capacities until the amalgamation into the Mercian Regiment in 2007. And let's see, can we tie it back It's next to Jodrell Bank, is it? Um, Lower Withington. Yeah, it's not. It's not Lower Withington. It's Withington Hall, which I don't think it's in Withington. It could be. I can't remember. I looked at it on the map, and the only thing I saw was Northwich there. Is that Withington? Don't think so. Tie it back. Connections. The Cheshire Regiment badge. And that's a wicked acorn. So that was a long one, wasn't it? But that was this day in history. Quebec, the city of Quebec, the Battle of Quebec. So there's our photo for the next time. I will plug my Sail Makers Market again. I'm at the Sail Makers Market. Come by, say hello, and hopefully we'll be here tomorrow, and maybe you can figure out where that photo is. It's in Greater Manchester, and that's what we're going to talk about tomorrow. Something connected to this photo, or where this photo is. So that is our photo and our story for tomorrow. So I hope you enjoyed that. It's the James Burke of Sail. Okay, I'll take it. So that's it. I enjoyed that. That was a lot of fun for me. I watched a whole bunch more of that stuff last night. So that was a little going back to my own history, memories from grade 6 and in school, things that happened in grade 6, and Bob Joy and all of that brought up all kinds of memories. The Battle of Quebec. It's a big part of Canadian history. It's very important in Canadian history. It's something I learned about in school. I don't know what they're learning about in school in Newfoundland these days. The things I hear when I look at the news from back home is just, it's horrendous. It's part of the reason we came here. North America is falling apart, dear friends. North America is in trouble. I hope it doesn't spread here. Let's get Trump on a plane as fast as we can. Okay, enough of that. I could go on about politics too if you like. I have lots to say about things that are happening in the news, but we'll leave that for another day. We'll see you in the next one.